It's just gone 10 o'clock. You're watching eNCA. I'm Kathy Mutlatlana. Welcome. Now, the National Union of Mine Workers has warned its members to avoid mines around Marikana in the northwest. That's as several of its members received death threats after trying to go back to work. The area has been gripped by tensions since a 16-week AMCU strike came into effect in January, with members demanding a 12,500 Rand wage. Now, mining analysts have said the platinum strike has gone on for far too long. Yet AMCU has vowed to continue with the strike until its members' demands are met. Mining companies were hoping that these workers would be back at their posts come Wednesday morning. Now, let's get some analysis from labor law expert Tony Healy. Tony, thank you so much for your time and for coming in this morning. You know, 2 years ago, when the Marikana massacre happened and the negotiations were taking place with employers, union and the workers, we saw AMCU really change the face of how bargaining is done in this country. But in retrospect, hindsight, has that worked out for better or worse?
Well, I think it's worked out for worse. I think that two things that are noticeable is firstly that AMCU has come in and created very significant expectations in the minds of their members who were historically NUM members, and they would have done that in order to try and attract members. Secondly, from a collective bargaining strategy point of view, they haven't really been bargaining. They've really stuck to their original demand of 12,500 Rand from the very beginning. And unfortunately for them, and indeed Mr. Matunjwa, the workers have made a sacrifice of almost a third of their annual salary in the strike and haven't achieved their objectives.
And let's look at how negotiation this time round has taken place. We have the workers who've rejected the offer that was made, and Lonmin trying to reach out to employees directly. And we see AMCU coming in between that and saying, actually, this is not allowed, and warning that, in fact, this is what led to Marikana. This is how the massacre happened. And what's the role of that, do you think, in this whole issue?
Well, I think there are two things at play here. I think AMCU are raising the spectre of Marikana because it's so symbolic. And it touches a nerve with the nation, so it's impactful. And secondly, AMCU are of the view, as we know, because they've taken the mining houses to court on this issue, that the mining houses may not communicate directly with their members. Now, the fact of the matter is, the mining houses may indeed do so, but perhaps what's more important is, are they in the circumstances permitted to negotiate directly with the strikers and even reach an agreement with those strikers who want to return to work? Because the fact of the matter is, as we speak, that AMCU does remain the collective bargaining agent, the mandated collective bargaining agent of all strikers.
Tony, you know, you hear a representative from NUM speaking about just how bad the situation is on the ground. How does one begin to intervene in the situation, and where should that leadership directive, particularly in government, be coming from?
Well, I think government's doing what it can in terms of SAPS deployment. One problem, for example, is that the SAPS have been repeatedly asking Mr. Matunjwa to meet with him to try and facilitate some kind of coordinated effort to maintain peace in the region, and he hasn't made himself available yet to the SAPS, notwithstanding the fact that we've had all of these deaths, we have all of this intimidation. So I think that would go a long way in its own right to try and assist, because everybody's agreeing to meet with the SAPS except Mr. Matunjwa at the moment.
And where to from here on? I mean, how do you begin to resolve the situation, particularly to prevent it from escalating to what we've seen before?
It's extremely difficult. You know, there are so many strikers. The strikers endured for such a long period of time. The desperation is massive. You know, my sense is that we are going to see resolution within the next probably week to 10 days, but the violence and the intimidation could get worse before it gets better. But Kathy, all strikes do come to an end, and very often at the time that you least expect them to, given the prevailing circumstances.
And what makes you believe that this one will come to an end?
Because the workers are ultimately going to need some form of income to feed their families, to pay their debts, and to sustain themselves. We know historically there's no such thing as an indefinite strike. We're seeing a much longer strike in this circumstance than we've seen almost historically in our country. But we're beginning to see, I think, the beginning of the end game, where these tensions are building and there's a toe-to-toe between the employers and the trade unions. And my guess is that ultimately the strikers are going to have to return, and they will have returned not having achieved very much, especially given that they've lost about a third of their annual income this year.
Well, certainly the strike ending would benefit all those hungry families in Marikana.
Yes, indeed.
All right, thank you so much for your insight this morning. That was Tony Healy, Labour analyst.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com